What's up, you guys? Sean Ross at FightfulWrestling.com. Big wrestling weekend ahead, and a part of that is AIW's Slumber Party Massacre, Thursday, April 4th, 11:59 p.m., White Eagle Hall in Jersey City, New Jersey. If you can't catch it there, it is streaming live on Fight. And I'm here with a man behind AIW, John Thorne. John, how are you?
Good. I just have to correct you. A couple weeks ago, we did bump the show up to 11 p.m. So we're starting at 11 p.m., not 11:59.
11 p.m. Again, you all can see that on Fight. Man, this is a good-looking show and a very interesting one. I love WrestleMania weekend because it brings out a lot of different stuffs. What are some of the challenges or benefits that you face booking a show that weekend as opposed to some of the other times you run shows?
Well, the benefits are yet to be seen. I think has certainly been numerous challenges that we've encountered throughout this process. We've been, this is something that we've been working on since I think this early summer is when we were first approached by GCW about participating in it. And as everyone is fully aware, so much has changed in the wrestling industry since the early summer. So how things at first were written down on paper as an idea have just drastically changed throughout this process. As far as the benefits, like I said, it's yet to be really determined if this is going to be a beneficial risk for AIW or not. We're still about a week and a half out, but things are looking a lot better than they were a couple weeks ago. I'll say that much.
You'll have some big names on this show: Ethan Page, Nick Gage, MJF, Cole Cabana. But two of the announced matches, one in particular, I'm really interested to see how it unfolds. And you've always been a very transparent guy about this stuff. Scott Steiner and Swoggle. What kind of reaction does Scott Steiner give you when you say, "Yeah, you're working Swoggle that night"?
Okay, so this whole thing. Now this has been an experience to say the least. So when we were approached about this idea, like I said, in the early summer, Swoggle has become one of my best friends in wrestling, and he was kind of down on last year as far as WrestleMania weekend went for him. He didn't have that many bookings, he didn't have that many shows. So once we were kind of invited to partake in the collective, Swoggle said, "I want to do something totally outside of the box, totally outside of the realm of anything anyone would ever dream up." And we started going over different ideas. And we had worked with Scott Steiner in the summertime and around July for our big show, Absolution. And Swoggle was like, "I want to wrestle Scott Steiner." Well, we didn't discuss that with Scott Steiner at that time. So, we fast forward. I just, a lot of the times you don't really discuss a lot of the details when you book somebody. So, I talked to Scott, I explained to him, I'm having an event on this date in this area. We work out a deal and that's kind of that. Well, Scott Steiner is a guy that I don't know what his hours of operation are, but he will usually text me between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on like a Wednesday. And I get like a text like, "Do you have me booked against Swoggle?" Probably, I don't know, about 6 weeks ago. And then I respond, and then I don't get a response back for weeks. So I was a little nervous on how he was taking that, in which then he called me literally last week and was explaining to me his kind of, I guess, reservations about the match, because I can't make this stuff up. He is worried about how the match is going to go based on WCW entering him in a midget tossing contest sometime in the 2000 or 2001. And he said, it was really difficult for him to work with a midget and lift them up. So he's very nervous about how the match is going to go. But he's not opposed to it. But it's a very strange dynamic, and we're trying to work our way through it. But to be honest, I don't know how Scott Steiner versus Swoggle is going to turn out. It was just one of those things to where we wanted to do something that was totally outside of the box, not only for Swoggle, but just like, okay, this is something that nobody would ever book, for better or for worse. And it was put out there to get attention on this show, which it has already, done tenfold for us. What happens after the fact, that's to be determined as well. But Scott Steiner is very nervous about that based on his midget tossing experience in WCW.
God, that is fantastic. That is fantastic. You also have Otani on the show. How long has it been since he's wrestled in the States?
Oh, that is a question for somebody that isn't me, but I would say probably at least 20 to 25 years. Yeah. He was a guy that was somebody that I've wanted to book over the last, I would say, really 2 years. As the talent pool in the United States is kind of getting a little bit smaller as far as who is going to bring in hype. You've seen a lot more international guys, start coming over again, like Great Sasuke has been doing a lot in America again, and, Masato Tanaka and things like that. And Otani was a guy that was on my, kind of list who I wanted to use, but, I just had not reached out yet. And this was kind of a thing that, being a part of the collective, this is a benefit of it. I was approached by Game Changer, who said, "Hey, would you be interested in bringing Otani over with us during Mania weekend?" Which I jumped at almost immediately, and I started thinking who's somebody that could work well with Otani, and there's a zillion people that could work well with Otani, but somebody that really is just a gigantic fan of early New Japan Wrestling and All Japan Wrestling is Eddie Kingston. And I thought that would be by far the most perfect matchup that we could offer, because we want to offer an authentic AIW experience where, there's plenty of guys that are going to be in the area that may look better on paper against Otani, I guess you could say.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be an AIW show. So, Eddie Kingston was somebody that we looked at on our roster that we thought would match up great with Otani for that weekend.
Yeah, I think outside of maybe a weekend in 2002, he hasn't wrestled in the States since WCW, since he dropped the Cruiserweight title to Dean Malenko.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just an unbelievable get. A lot of promotions will kind of promote one show at a time, and that's it. But if you go to AIW's website, you all have your shows listed throughout June. I mean, you've got Keep Their Heads Ringing, you got Gauntlet for the Gold, you have your tournaments in June. What gets you, I'm trying to think of how to put this. What motivates you to book so far ahead, or at least promote so far ahead in that regard? And was there a time when maybe you didn't do that, you went one show at a time?
Oh, absolutely. There was a show that we did that one show at a time. Being in independent wrestling is, it's very hard to not do things one show at a time. We've, kind of had a good few years to where we don't have to, it's like people living paycheck to paycheck, so to speak. We've had a good couple years to where I've built up a reserve amount of money to where, okay, now I know that we can kind of plan ahead and get a schedule, because it's getting harder and harder to book people just based on, it seems like there's way more independent promotions, and there are, like I've said before, there's just a certain amount of guys that are kind of bringing attention to these shows, so to speak, and they're getting booked out so far in advance. You have to, as a promoter, you have to adapt, and you have to try to get at least some semblance of a schedule out there and with dates. So, not only do we have all those shows, like we're promoting a show this Thursday night, and then, next Thursday we'll be in Jersey City. So it's just kind of crazy how things are happening for us right now. But there's different venues and different things and different opportunities arising for us to where we can't pass it up. So I think we're probably running too many shows for my liking right now, but you have to kind of, you got to kind of roll with it and, go with the deal when the deal is there, and things are going well for us in the Cleveland area. So, we're just going to keep rolling the dice and see what happens.
Speaking of those tournaments and the Cleveland area, you have those two tournaments in mid-June, the JT Lightning Invitational Tournament and the Chandler Biggins Memorial Tag Team Tournament. What goes into selecting people who are going to be in these tournaments? I mean, tag team wrestling, there aren't a whole lot of teams on the independent scene that are really that you hear getting signed up by the AEWs and WWE and stuff like that. So does that make it harder, or are you just acutely aware of like teams that would fit this well and you're like, yeah, let's bring them in?
Well, we utilize quite a bit of tag teams. Maybe they're not as widely well known at this time, but our tag team division is pretty well established, in at least in our universe of things, which is probably a smaller universe when you look at the grand scheme of independent wrestling. But for our fan base, we utilize several teams that are probably more regionalized than most other teams, but their tag team wrestling is very much lacking as far as teams that are available out there, outside of, Lucha Brothers and LAX and teams like that. It kind of drops off on who, the vast majority of people know. And that's more of what that tag team tournament is about kind of showcasing maybe a little bit more of unknown teams. And the JT Lightning tournament is kind of all over the map. We look at people on our roster, and then we try to find, kind of unique talents that aren't doing a lot. Like, I guess I'll give you guys an exclusive. Like, the first entrant this year is going to be Savio Vega. That's number one guy that's entering the JT Lightning Invitational this year. So we try to find some legends. We try to find, last year we had Marty Jannetty and Gangrel, and so we kind of go all over the map for the JT Lightning tournament, because I think the work rate tournament is kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit overdone. We try to make ours a little bit more fun. You're going to get your work rate matches, but you're also going to get, like last year we did Joey Janela versus Marty Jannetty 2, and it was pure just insanity. I mean, Marty Jannetty and Joey Janela are going through tables, and Marty Jannetty almost died 4 times. But
slow night for him, huh?
Right. Yeah. It's not so much about that, balls to the wall, I guess, PWG style for lack of a better term. It's more about creating a spectacle throughout a weekend. And, that's something that we've gotten somewhat good at, and it works for us. And I understand that mindset does not appeal to everybody, but it seems to be working for us, and specifically in the Cleveland area.
Another thing that works for you guys is the card is going to change, your all's podcast. My favorite story on that show was when Sid blamed the travel ban on missing a booking, and EC3 showed up as Sid. I was supposed to interview EC3 as Sid in the weeks following that, and unfortunately some things prevented that, but when you contact an EC3 and you say, hey, do you have any Jorts? Can you throw in a wig? Like, where did you find a Sid wig in that amount of time?
So I guess the benefit of, just being AIW and being in Cleveland is we've given a lot of these guys their start before they were anything.
You get all kinds of love, even on WWE programming these days.
And, EC3 is a guy that he was on the very first AIW show. He's been with us, and that was in 2005. I've known this guy for 15 years at this point. Guys like Johnny Gargano, all sorts of people, that kind of started with us. And EC3 just happened to be home for the holidays. He wasn't booked for the show or anything like that. He was just the show was in December, and he was home for Christmas. When Sid canceled, I shot him a text and I said, "Hey, are you still in town?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "But I don't have my wrestling gear." And I said, "Well, you don't need it." We sent somebody out to a thrift store to look for a leather vest. And I honestly have no idea where the wig came from, but it was all picked up that afternoon somehow. Whether it was somebody owned the wig, I really don't recall that, but. That was just kind of a thing that happened on the whim, which is, I guess if you promote independent wrestling for long enough, you learn that you have to adapt to every situation, and you can't kind of dwell on which I was super bummed because I was a gigantic Sid fan as a kid. So I was looking forward to this more than probably anybody the entire day. And, I knew all the Sid horror stories, and I knew the risks, and Sid, when you talk to Sid on the phone, he leads you to believe that he's coming and everything is all good. And when that moment happened, I was bummed about it, but I realized, hey, I'm recording this entire phone conversation right now. So at least there's proof that he was booked. He's acknowledging he's booked, and he is giving me the most ridiculous cancellation story of all time. So as much as I wanted to dwell on it, I was kind of looking at okay, this isn't as bad as I think it is. Even though I thought it was pretty bad, because, independent wrestling is, some people just want to show up and they want to meet Sid and they don't care about the show, but they'll buy a ticket for that. So I'm juggling all that kind of stuff in my head as a promoter. But at the end of the day, we just had to roll with it. And I texted EC3, and I think it made for a very memorable moment. And then we took all the Sid 8x10s that we had printed up, and EC3 went out there in his Sid outfit, and he did a free meet and greet with every single fan and signed autographs as Sid. And actually he signed autographs that said, "I'm not Sid," EC3, for everybody, and took photos. So for people that were there, that's probably one of their greatest AIW memories. Except for the one guy that
get that. You will never get that at any other time.
Right, and that was just one of those things you can't plan that to happen. That was just something that happened organically throughout the day. We had no backup plan for Sid, and when I had that phone conversation with him, I think it was probably 1 p.m. in the afternoon. So you don't have a lot of time to get something together, by a 6:30 p.m. doors opening. So that was kind of all just okay, what can we do? And, I was sitting in a room with Hornswoggle and Eddie Kingston, and, we started, going back and forth, and I texted EC3, and the idea just kind of evolved right out of that moment.
I'm assuming you haven't heard from Sid since then.
I have not heard from Sid. However, last year at WrestleCon, Sid actually did show up. But Colt Cabana just kept yelling from a distance You owe AIW money, Sid. Fuck you, Sid. And he had no idea which direction it was coming from. And, Sid is, a huge dude. And he would just do like a head turn, like totally something he would do in a match, just looking down the aisles of WrestleCon trying to find out who was yelling at him. But he never figured it out.
Well, John, I want to thank you so much. Of course, you guys can go to AIW's official website, AIWwrestling.com, to get all the information on their upcoming shows. Where else can people find you guys?
You can find us on Twitter at AI Wrestling, Facebook, Absolute Intense Wrestling, Instagram at AI Wrestling. We recently have gotten into the Patreon game. We're producing all sorts of premium content for Patreon. Independent wrestling, every dollar counts these days. So somebody kind of presented the idea of Patreon to me. So we're producing exclusive podcasts and all sorts of different content on our Patreon. You just have to search Absolute Intense Wrestling on Patreon. And Fight TV, please support us on Fight TV next week. Slumber Party Massacre. There's a package deal. You can get every show on the collective for $99. I believe it's 11 total shows with unlimited replays, which, every dollar is going to count for all those promotions that are taking a gigantic risk next week, because the collective is not the established kind of brand or whatever you want to call it for WrestleMania weekend. It's usually, a WWN in a high spots location. This is a kind of a brand new concept, a brand new thing. And there's a lot of promoters that are taking gigantic risks next week to try to put on these events WrestleMania weekend. And every bit of support helps, whether you can attend the events live Mania weekend or buy the individual iPay-per-views or the package iPay-per-view, which is a pretty good deal. It's 11 shows for $99 on Fight TV. I would certainly appreciate it. I'm sure all the promoters would appreciate every bit of support. And I thank, Fightful for giving me this, platform to promote these events. And I certainly appreciate it.
Well, I look forward to our next show, which is, of course, the Matt Riddle AIW tribute show.
That's the last time I was on this show.
Yeah.
It was that whole fiasco.
It's been a while. A while.
We're both doing okay. It worked out, worked out okay for both parties.
But you need a decent three there to dress up as Matt.
Well, that was he gave a little bit more notice than Sid, so
yeah,
he gave us a little bit more time to get, and then he gave us some other reasons to continue to get mad. So
he did. Yes, he did.
We got our little jab in at him. We did an entire event based on a pirate called.
I saw that the Paul Burchill thing.
And we booked Paul Burchill, so we got our little kind of haha thing in, and
in the end,
everybody moved on.
In the end, any excuse to book Paul Burchill is a good time in my opinion.
What's crazy is I've been getting contacted by promoters like, hey, do you have Paul Burchill's info? And I give it out, and I guess, I don't know, maybe he's gone off the grid again. I guess he's not responding.
He was like 15 years ahead of his time.
Yeah, and he worked so hard. If I had more of a budget at that time, or whatever you want to call it, I probably would have brought him back again, because that show, AIW Walk the Plank, Paul Burchill worked so hard. It was like he was getting ready for another run. And I don't know if he ever wrestled again after that, to be perfectly honest with you. But it was great.
I wish he would. I mean, somebody, when that happened, like I think it was probably earlier this year, they were like, oh, who could go on a PCO run? And they mentioned Paul Burchill, and I'm like, he's 39. He's not like 52. The guy's,
right. He's
still young.
Hey, I'm hoping I can revive Savio Vega this June. That's my big plan.
That'd be a solid one as well. Thank you.
I did ask him if he would wrestle as Quang.
I was about to say that. I didn't want to be a dick, but I was about to say that.
Oh, I asked. Trust me. if there's anybody that has ever done any sort of weird, obscure gimmick, and I'm trying to book them, I will ask for them to do that. And sometimes, sometimes they're offended. Sometimes they don't understand. Like Paul Burchill is a perfect example of that. He could not believe that I wanted the pirate gimmick. And he was so excited to do it, but he was like, I can't believe that anybody would want me to do this.
Good God. I hope we do see more of him, and I hope we see more of AIW on Fightful. It was a great conversation. I could talk to you all day about this, John. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.